The call came at 3 in the morning. My granddaughter Lily was gone. The hospital said overdose, but I knew my girl. She was only 19. I stood in her room, my hand trembling on her pink quilt, and found her diary tucked under the mattress. The funeral was in 6 hours. I opened the small, lockless book right there. The first entry was from her birthday. Mum gave me a new vitamin drink. She says it'll keep my skin young like hers. My breath caught. I read another line. I feel so tired after drinking it. Mum says it's normal. My own daughter, Sarah, giving her something that made her tired. I closed the diary and slipped it into my purse. Sarah would be here soon to help me get dressed. I needed to know what was in those drinks. I knew I had to read every word before the funeral, before Sarah could spin more lies. I felt a crushing weight in my chest, the image of Lily's smiling face now forever marred. I sat on her bed, the scent of her strawberry shampoo still faint in the air. I turned the page. Another entry described dizziness, nausea, always after the special drinks from Mom. Sarah had always been jealous of Lily's youth, her opportunities. I heard a car door slam outside. Sarah was early. My heart hammered. I quickly stuffed the diary deeper into my purse just as the front door clicked open. "Mum, are you ready? We need to leave for the chapel soon." Sarah's voice was smooth, coated in false concern. She walked into Lily's room, her eyes scanning everything, lingering on the slightly disturbed mattress. I forced a smile, my fingers tight around the purse strap. "Just getting a few things," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming the last traces of Lily. "Let me help you with that," she said, reaching for my purse. I clutched it tighter. "I've got it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She knew I was hiding something. Then, my son, Mark, called from the hallway. "Sarah, the car service is here. We need to go." Sarah hesitated, her gaze still locked on my purse. "I'll meet you outside," I said, moving past her. In the hallway, I saw Mark's tired face. He didn't know anything. None of them did. As I walked to the car, I realized Sarah wasn't just a grieving mother. She was a suspect, and I was the only one who knew. As I sat in the car, I remembered the diary mentioned Sarah keeping the drink bottles in a locked cabinet in her kitchen. I had a key to her house. The funeral would be the longest hours of my life. Then I would get into that cabinet. The chapel was cold, too quiet. I sat in the front row, Lily's diary a hidden weight in my lap. Sarah sat beside me, dabbing fake tears. She leaned over. "You look pale, Mom. Maybe you shouldn't have come." Her words were sweet poison. I needed to survive this charade and get to her house afterward. It was agony sitting through this, listening to people offer condolences to the woman who might have killed my granddaughter. Sarah slipped her arm through mine, her grip firm, and the tension grew. "I'll take care of everything from now on," she whispered. "You don't need to worry about a thing." Meaning she would control everything. Lily's belongings, the apartment, me. I nodded, playing the frail old woman. Inside, I was mapping her kitchen in my mind. The locked cabinet was above the refrigerator. I had a key from when I watered her plants last summer. The service dragged on. I focused on the flower arrangements, the muted colours, anything to keep from screaming. When it was over, Sarah herded me toward the car. "I'll drive you home," she said, but I needed to go to her place. "I left my heart medication at your house, Sarah, from my last visit." It was a lie, but a believable one. She paused, then smiled tightly. "Of course, Mom. We'll stop by." At her house, she stayed close, watching me as I pretended to search the bathroom. It must be in the kitchen, I said, moving quickly. The cabinet was just as Lily described. My hands shook as I pulled out the key. Sarah was in the hallway on her phone. I heard her say, "Yes, everything is under control." I unlocked the cabinet. Inside were several small bottles of a clear liquid, unlabeled. I grabbed one, stuffing it into my pocket. Then I saw a notebook tucked behind them, Sarah's handwriting. I took that too. Just as I relocked the cabinet, Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Find your pills?" Her eyes darted to the cabinet, then back to me. I held up an old bottle of aspirin from my purse. "Right here." She didn't look convinced. Back in my own kitchen, I spread the evidence on the table. The stolen bottle, Sarah's notebook. The bottle had no label, but it smelled faintly bitter. Lily's diary lay open to an entry where she wrote, "Mum says this is a cleanse, but I feel weaker each day." I needed to identify what was in the bottle and see what Sarah had written. The isolation was crushing. I couldn't trust anyone in the family now. Then my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mum, I'm coming over to check on you. You seemed off today." She was coming now. I had maybe 20 minutes. I called my old friend, Martha, a retired nurse. "Can you test something for me?" Discreetly. I described the liquid. She agreed to meet me at the park tomorrow. I hid the bottle and notebook in a flower canister. Then I started reading Sarah's notes. It was a log. Dates, times, doses given to Lily. Comments like slowing down and less vibrant. My blood ran cold. This was deliberate. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Sarah yet. It was a neighbor with a casserole. "I heard about Lily," she said, her eyes pitying. I took the dish, my mind racing. After she left, I checked the time. Sarah would be here any minute. I needed a decoy. I pulled out Lily's old photo album and laid it on the coffee table, looking the grieving grandmother. When Sarah arrived, she scanned the room, her eyes lingering on the kitchen. "How are you holding up?" she asked, too sweetly. "As well as can be expected," I said, pointing to the album. "Remember this?" She barely glanced. "Mom, I think you should consider moving into assisted living. It's too much for you here." There it was. Her move to get me out of the way. Then I realized, in her notebook, I'd seen a note about securing assets after the situation is resolved. She wasn't just after Lily, she was after my house, my savings. I smiled weakly. "We'll talk about it later, dear." After she left, I knew I had to act fast before she could legally box me in. The next morning, I met Martha at the park. I handed her the bottle in a paper bag. "What is this?" she asked, sniffing it cautiously. "I think it's what made Lily sick," I said, my voice low. She promised to have it tested by a friend at a lab. I had to get proof before Sarah could enact her plan. I was haunted by the gnawing fear that I was too late, that Sarah had already poisoned others or would target me next. The situation became more urgent when I got home and found a voicemail from a lawyer, Sarah's lawyer, requesting a meeting to discuss future care arrangements. She was moving quickly. I went to the bank and withdrew some cash from my secret stash, the one my husband left me for emergencies. I needed to hire my own lawyer, but discreetly. At the bank, the teller, a young woman who knew me, said, "Your daughter was in earlier, asking about joint accounts." My heart sank. Sarah was trying to access my money. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Then, on the way home, I saw Sarah's car parked outside a diner. She was with a man I didn't recognize. I slipped into the shop next door and watched through the window. They were arguing. He handed her an envelope. She looked angry. I couldn't hear them, but I took a photo with my phone. Later, I enlarged it. The envelope had a logo, Bayview Clinic. Lily had been to that clinic for allergies. Was Sarah involved with someone there? Suddenly, I remembered Lily's diary mentioned a Dr. Evans from Bayview who prescribed the vitamins. Sarah wasn't acting alone. I had to find out who this man was. That night, I dug out old phone books and called information, but no listing for a Dr. Evans at Bayview. Then, my doorbell rang at midnight. It was the police. "Ma'am, we have a report of a disturbance here. Your daughter is concerned about your well-being." Sarah had called them on me. The officers were polite but firm. "Your daughter says you've been confused, wandering at night." Sarah was painting me as incompetent. I invited them in, offered tea, played the lucid grandmother. "It's a misunderstanding," I said. "I'm grieving, but I'm fine." They left with a warning to take it easy. I needed to solidify my legal standing before Sarah could have me declared unfit. The humiliation and invasion were crushing. I felt overwhelmed from all directions now. I couldn't sleep, jumping at every sound. In the morning, Martha called. "The test results are in. Meet me at the library." At the library, in a quiet corner, she showed me a printout. "It's a concentrated mix of sedatives and a slow-acting toxin. Not illegal, but dangerous in accumulation. This could cause organ failure over time." My hands trembled. This was the proof. But it wasn't enough for the police without context. I needed to link it to Sarah and the doctor. Martha agreed to sign a statement. I thanked her, my mind on the next step, confronting the clinic. I drove to Bayview Clinic, my heart pounding. The receptionist was young, bored. "I'm here to see Dr. Evans regarding my granddaughter, Lily," I said, firm. She checked the computer. "I'm sorry, Dr. Evans hasn't worked here for 6 months." My hope faltered. "Can you tell me where he went?" She shook her head. "Patient confidentiality." As I turned to leave, I saw the man from the diner walking down the hall. He saw me and quickly ducked into an office. I memorized the name on the door. Administration. Then my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Mum, where are you? The lawyer is at my house. We need to talk about your living situation." She knew I was digging. When I got home, I found an envelope in my mailbox, and a chilling thought struck me. No return address. Inside was a note. "Stop asking questions. You don't know what you're dealing with." And a photo of me leaving the library with Martha. They were watching me. I opened my laptop to email Martha, but my screen was frozen, a single message blinking. "We're watching." I unplugged the laptop immediately, my hands shaking. The threat was real. They had access to my devices. Sarah or someone working with her was monitoring my every move. I had to assume my phone was compromised too. I needed a safe way to communicate and to secure the evidence I had. The deadline was now. I couldn't wait for them to make the next move. I grabbed my purse and the physical evidence, the diary, the bottle, the notebook, and hid them in different places around the house. The flour canister was no longer safe. I slipped the diary under a loose floorboard in the hall closet, the one my husband had installed for emergencies. Then I took the bottle and notebook to the garage, tucking them inside an old toolbox behind some rags. My heart pounded with each step. I was a 72-year-old woman turning my own home into a fortress against my child. I knew what I had to do. Find Dr. Evans and connect him to Sarah, all without using any devices they might be monitoring. It cost me my peace of mind. Every sound in the house set me on edge. And I couldn't trust anyone but perhaps Martha, though I dared not drag her deeper into this. The pressure mounted when my doorbell rang again. I peered through the peephole. It was Mark, my son. He looked worried. "Mum, Sarah said you're not answering your phone. She's really concerned about you." I let him in, forcing calm. "My phone must be acting up," I said. He hugged me, and for a moment I wanted to confess everything, but I couldn't. Sarah had already poisoned his niece. What would she do to him if he knew? He stayed for coffee, and I subtly probed. "Mark, did Lily ever mention a Dr. Evans from Bayview Clinic?" He frowned. "Yeah, I think so. Sarah took her there for some special treatments." "Why?" My blood ran cold. So Mark knew about the doctor, but not the details. I changed the subject, asking about his kids. After he left, I knew I had to act fast. I drove to the public library, where I could use a computer without it being traced to me. I searched for Dr. Evans and Bayview Clinic. The results showed he had left, but I found an old news article about a malpractice suit settled out of court. Something unexpected happened as I printed the article. The librarian, a kind older woman, said, "Oh, Dr. Evans? He works at the new wellness center over on Maple now." She gave me the address. That was unexpected. He hadn't disappeared entirely. I thanked her and left, feeling a surge of hope. But as I walked to my car, I saw a familiar sedan parked across the street. Sarah's car. She was watching the library. I ducked behind a bush, my heart racing. She didn't see me. I waited until she drove away, then hurried to my car. A sudden realization struck me on the drive home. Sarah wasn't merely trying to keep me quiet. She was following me to safeguard her secret. When I got home, I checked the loose floorboard. The diary was still there, but something felt off. A small piece of thread I'd left on top was missing. Someone had been in the house while I was out. I stood in the hall, staring at the floorboard. Someone had searched my house. It had to be Sarah. She had a key. I needed to change the locks, but that would take time I didn't have. First, I had to secure the evidence elsewhere. I gathered the diary, bottle, and notebook and put them in a plastic bag. I decided to take them to Martha's house for safekeeping, but I couldn't call her. I had to go in person. The urgency was palpable. If they found the evidence, it would be destroyed, and I'd have no case. I felt the weight of my age, my slow movements, but I pushed through. I drove to Martha's, constantly checking my rearview mirror for anyone following me. Now, I aimed to secure the evidence and then face Dr. Evans at the wellness center. It was tearing my family apart. I deceived my son and avoided my daughter. The pressure intensified when I arrived at Martha's and saw a strange car parked outside. I hesitated, then rang the bell. Martha answered, her face pale. "I've been trying to call you," she whispered. "Someone came by earlier, asking questions about you. She let me in, and I handed her the bag. Keep this hidden. Don't tell anyone." She nodded, understanding the gravity. I didn't stay long. I couldn't risk leading anyone to her. From Martha's, I drove straight to the wellness center on Maple. It was a sleek, modern building that felt too sterile. I walked in, pretending to be a potential client. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Evans about a consultation," I told the receptionist. She smiled. "Do you have an appointment?" I said no, but I was persistent. "It's regarding my granddaughter, Lily. He treated her." The receptionist's smile faded. "One moment." She made a call, and I saw her glance at me nervously. After hanging up, she said, "Dr. Evans is unavailable. You should leave." But I stood my ground. "I'm not leaving until I speak with him." Then, a man in a white coat emerged from the back. It was the man from the diner. Dr. Evans. He looked annoyed. "Can I help you?" he said, his voice tight. I stepped closer. "You treated my granddaughter, Lily. She's dead. I know what you gave her." His eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't discuss patient details without family consent." I pressed on. "Her mother, Sarah, is my daughter. She consented." He shook his head. "I need to see documentation. Now please leave before I call security." My phone buzzed unexpectedly, a text from an unknown number. "Leave now, or Martha gets hurt." They were menacing, my friend. I had to go. I left the center, my hands trembling. As I got into my car, I saw Dr. Evans watching me from the window. Then he pulled out his phone. I realized he wasn't simply a doctor. He was collaborating with Sarah, and they'd hurt anyone to cover their tracks. I drove away, but I didn't go home. I went to the police station, ready to file a report. But when I walked in, the officer at the desk recognized me. "Mrs. Gable, your daughter was just here. She's very concerned about your mental state." Sarah had beaten me to it. I stood in the police station, feeling the walls close in. Sarah had preempted me, painting me as delusional. The officer, a young man with a sympathetic face, said, "Maybe you should go home and rest, ma'am." I knew I couldn't file a report now. They'd dismiss it as the ramblings of a confused old woman. I left, my spirit bruised, but not broken. I needed a new approach, one that didn't rely on the authorities yet. I decided to visit Lily's father, my ex-son-in-law, David. He lived across town and had been estranged from Sarah for years. Maybe he knew something, or could help. The deadline was tightening. Sarah's lawyer was pushing for that meeting about my care. I drove to David's apartment, a modest place in a quiet neighborhood. He answered the door, surprised to see me. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" he asked, letting me in. I didn't mince words. "David, I think Sarah had something to do with Lily's death." He paled, running a hand through his hair. I always suspected something was off with Sarah, but I never thought. He told me that Sarah had cut off his access to Lily's medical records months ago. She said it was for Lily's privacy, but now I wonder. He agreed to help me get those records if he could. This was a breakthrough. With David's parental rights, he might access what I couldn't. I needed to get Lily's complete medical records from Bayview Clinic. It meant reopening old wounds for David and endangering his ties with Sarah. Yet he agreed. The pressure came when I got home and found a formal letter from Sarah's lawyer scheduling a meeting for tomorrow to discuss voluntary relocation to an assisted living facility. They were moving fast. I called David from a payphone near the grocery store. No tracking. He said he'd go to the clinic first thing in the morning. I spent the evening organizing my thoughts, writing down everything I knew in a notebook I kept hidden in my Bible. It was my only safe record. The next morning, I waited for David's call. When it came, his voice was grim. "Eleanor, I got the records, but there's something else. The clinic had a log of prescriptions signed by Dr. Evans, but the doses are way higher than normal, and there are notes from Sarah authorizing increases." This was the proof I needed, direct involvement. But then he said, "I also saw a recent insurance claim submitted by Sarah for Lily's treatment, dated after her death." That was fraud. David surprised me by suggesting we go to the police together with the evidence. But as we spoke, I heard a noise in my background. A key turning in the lock. Sarah let herself in, smiling sweetly. "Mum, time for our meeting with the lawyer." She had a man with her, the lawyer. I ended the call quickly. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the Bible on the table. "What were you doing, Mum?" she asked, her voice too calm. I played dumb. "Just reading, dear." The lawyer, a stern-faced man, began talking about the benefits of assisted living, but I noticed Sarah subtly nodding toward my bedroom. It dawned on me that she hadn't come only for the meeting. She was ransacking my house while the lawyer kept me occupied. I excused myself to use the bathroom, and from the hallway, I saw her slipping into my bedroom. She was looking for something specific, probably the evidence. I had to act before she found it. I hurried back to the living room, interrupting the lawyer. "I need to speak with Sarah alone for a moment," I said, my voice firm. He looked surprised but stepped outside. Sarah came out of my bedroom, her expression neutral. "What is it, Mum?" I decided to bluff. "I know about the insurance fraud, Sarah, and I have the medical records. If you don't call off this assisted living nonsense, I'll go to the police with everything." Her face tightened, but she didn't break. "You have no proof, and no one will believe you. You're a confused old woman." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Let this go, or you'll end up in a home faster than you can blink." This confrontation shattered whatever was left of our relationship. The strain was overwhelming. I was defying my own daughter, whom I now suspected of murder. But I held my ground. "I have copies of everything, Sarah. They're not here. You can search all you want." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Just then my phone rang, the landline which I kept for emergencies. It was David. "Eleanor, I'm at the police station now. I filed a report with the records. They're sending an officer to your house to take your statement." I hung up and told Sarah. "The police are on their way. You might want to leave." She stared at me, a mix of anger and fear in her eyes. Then she turned and left without a word, the lawyer following her. I sank onto the couch, trembling. But then I grasped that David hadn't really called. It was a figment of my stressed mind. The phone hadn't rung. It was a false memory, a sign of how overwhelmed I was. I checked the phone. No missed calls. I was alone, and Sarah would be back. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my go bag, a small backpack with cash, medications, and the hidden notebook, and headed for the door. But as I opened it, I saw a car parked down the street, watching. Sarah's car. She wasn't giving up. I decided to go to Martha's, but as I drove, I noticed the car following me. I took a detour through side streets, but they stayed on my tail. To my surprise, it wasn't Sarah's car. It was an unfamiliar dark sedan. Who else was involved? I pulled into a busy supermarket parking lot and lost them in the crowd. Inside, I used a store phone to call David. He answered, and I told him everything. He said he'd meet me at his place. When I arrived, he showed me the documents he'd gathered. Among them was a receipt from a chemical supply company, ordered by Sarah, for the substances found in the bottle. David indicated a name on the receipt. The company belonged to Dr. Evans. They were partners in this. I sat at David's kitchen table, the receipt in my hand. Sarah and Dr. Evans weren't just conspiring. They were running a scheme, possibly selling these harmful treatments to others. This went beyond Lily. It was bigger than I thought. Now, I focused on uncovering the whole scheme to prevent further harm. I faced the grim truth that my daughter could commit heinous acts, and I had to halt her, even if it ruined our family completely. Now, threats loomed from all directions. Sarah, the doctor, and perhaps more accomplices. David agreed to help me take this to the police with all the evidence we had, but we needed to do it carefully. We spent the evening compiling everything: Lily's diary, Sarah's notebook, the bottle, the medical records, and now the receipt. David knew a detective from his work. He called him and arranged a meeting for the next morning. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. But that night, as I tried to sleep on David's couch, I heard a noise outside. A car slowing down. I peered through the window. The dark sedan was back, parked across the street. They had found us. I woke David, and we decided to leave immediately for a hotel. We packed the evidence and slipped out the back door, using his car instead of mine. At the hotel, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lily, her young life cut short by her own mother's jealousy. The pain was fresh, but the resolve was stronger. In the morning, we headed to the police station to meet Detective Miller. David had known him for years, and he was sympathetic. We laid out all the evidence on his desk. He listened carefully, taking notes. "This is serious," he said. "We'll need to investigate Dr. Evans and your daughter, but it will take time." Just then, his phone rang. He answered, his expression turning grim. After hanging up, he looked at me. "Mrs. Gable, there's a problem. Your daughter has filed an emergency petition for guardianship over you, claiming you're a danger to yourself. A hearing is scheduled for this afternoon." Sarah threw a legal curveball, seeking to have me deemed unfit before I could reveal her deeds. We had to act fast. Detective Miller agreed to expedite the investigation, but he needed more time. David and I left the station, knowing we had to attend that hearing and fight it. As we walked to the car, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Drop the case, or David's custody of his son from his new marriage will be challenged." They were threatening his family now. It shocked me that Sarah knew of David's son, showing she'd been snooping into his affairs as well. We were all in danger. I looked at David, his face pale. "What do we do?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "We go to the hearing and fight." But as we drove, I realized the courthouse was the last place Sarah would expect me to bring the evidence. The courthouse hallway was cold, all echoing footsteps and sharp glances. Sarah stood with her lawyer, smiling at me like I was a misbehaving child. Her petition claimed I was forgetful, prone to wandering, and a danger to myself. I clutched my purse, where I'd hidden copies of the most damning pages from Lily's diary. I simply had to survive this hearing without being declared incompetent and plant the first seed of doubt about Sarah in the judge's mind. I was risking the last shred of our mother-daughter relationship dying right there in front of a stranger in a black robe. Sarah's lawyer began by listing incidents, the police visit, my erratic trip to the wellness center. Each one was twisted to make me look unstable. The judge, a weary-looking woman, listened patiently. Then it was my turn. I stood, my knees protesting, and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, my daughter is seeking control over me because I discovered what she did to my granddaughter, Lily." The room went quiet. Sarah's smile vanished. "I didn't pull out the diary yet. I just stated it plainly." The judge asked Sarah to respond. She lied smoothly. "My mother is confused with grief. Lily died of an overdose. There's no evidence of anything else." Her lawyer presented a signed letter from Dr. Evans stating I had harassed him with baseless accusations. The pressure was immense. They had prepared for this. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I turned to the judge and said, "I have evidence, but it's not here." However, I asked the court to consider why my daughter is so eager to have me declared incompetent, just as I started asking questions about Lily's death. The judge studied me, then Sarah. She could see the tension. Suddenly, David stood up from the back of the room. "Your Honor, I'm Lily's father. I can verify that Eleanor is of sound mind. It's Sarah who has been acting suspiciously, blocking my access to Lily's medical records." This unexpected support changed the atmosphere. The judge looked thoughtful. Sarah's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. She scheduled another hearing in 2 weeks and ordered an independent psychological evaluation for me. It was a temporary victory, but Sarah was furious. As we left the courtroom, she brushed past me and whispered, "You shouldn't have done that, Mom." Her threat was clear. Outside, David and I hugged. He said, "We have 2 weeks to get more proof." But as we walked to the car, I saw Dr. Evans standing across the street, watching us. He wasn't just a background player, he was deeply involved, and now he was showing himself. He made a phone call, his eyes locked on me. We had escalated the conflict, and they were responding in kind. The independent evaluator, a Dr. Rosenthal, was scheduled to visit my home in 3 days. I needed to present as perfectly competent, which meant I had to hide the immense stress and grief I was carrying. My house felt like a stage, and I had to perform the role of a capable grandmother. I spent the day cleaning, organizing, and hiding any sign of my investigation, the notes, the maps, everything. It was exhausting, and the loneliness was a physical ache. I missed Lily. I missed the daughter Sarah used to be, and I missed the simple peace of my old life. David helped me prepare, but he had to leave for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The pressure mounted when I received a registered letter. It was from a senior care placement service, thanking me for my inquiry about assisted living. I had never contacted them. Sarah was creating a paper trail, making it look like I was seeking help myself. It was clever and vile. I called the company to dispute it, but they said the request came from my email address. She had access to that too. I changed my password immediately, but the damage was done. That afternoon, I decided to visit the chemical supply company from the receipt David found. It was a long shot, but I needed to see if anyone there would talk to me. The place was on the industrial side of town, a small warehouse with a dusty office. I walked in, pretending to be a confused old woman looking for her order. The clerk, a young man with a bored expression, was dismissive until I mentioned Dr. Evans. His demeanor changed. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low. "I can't help you." But as he spoke, he quickly scribbled something on a scrap of paper and slid it across the counter. It read, "Not safe. They watch this place." Then he loudly said, "Please leave, ma'am, before I call your family." I took the paper and left, my heart racing. The note was a warning, but also a confirmation that something was wrong there. As I drove home, I checked my mirror constantly. No one followed. But when I arrived, my front door was slightly ajar. I never leave it unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The living room was ransacked, cushions thrown, drawers pulled out. They had been searching for the evidence again. But then I noticed something odd. On the coffee table, amid the mess, was a single photograph of Lily as a child, smiling. It wasn't there before. It was a message, a reminder of what I had lost, and a threat that they could reach into my most cherished memories. I picked up the photo, my hands trembling, and knew the psychological evaluation wasn't just a formality, it was my next battlefield. Dr. Rosenthal arrived precisely at 10, a kind-faced woman with a calm demeanor. I served tea in my best china, the living room perfectly restored after the break-in. I didn't mention it. It would seem paranoid. We talked about my life, my routine, my family. I was careful, measured. She asked about Lily. I allowed myself to show grief, but not obsession. I spoke of my other grandchildren, my garden, my weekly bridge game with Martha. I was the picture of a healthy, grieving grandmother. It was a performance that drained me, but I held it together. Then she asked about Sarah. "There seems to be some conflict there." she noted gently. I chose my words with care. We've had disagreements since Lily passed. Grief affects everyone differently. I didn't accuse. I merely stated facts. She seemed satisfied. As the evaluation was winding down, my phone rang. It was Martha. I excused myself and answered. Her voice was frantic. Eleanor, 2 men came to my house asking about you. They said they were from Adult Protective Services, but they didn't have proper ID. I called the real agency. They had no record of it. My blood ran cold. Sarah was targeting my friends now, trying to isolate me. I hung up and returned to Dr. Rosenthal, my smile strained. She had overheard enough. Is everything all right, Eleanor? She asked. I decided to tell a partial truth. A friend is just worried about some strangers in the neighborhood. It's probably nothing. She made a note. After she left, I felt uneasy. Had I done enough? The pressure was relentless. I needed to solidify my evidence. I remembered the scribbled note from the supply clerk. They watch this place. I needed to find out who they were. I drove back to the industrial area, but this time I parked a block away and watched the warehouse from a distance. For an hour, nothing happened. Then, a familiar car pulled up. Sarah's car. She got out and went inside. My heart sank. She was directly involved with the supply company. This was the link I needed. I took out my phone and started recording, zooming in on the entrance. After 10 minutes, she came out, followed by Dr. Evans. They argued on the sidewalk, their gestures sharp. I couldn't hear the words, but I captured it all on video. Then, Sarah pointed toward my neighborhood, and Dr. Evans nodded. They were planning their next move. As I drove home, I reviewed the video. It was shaky, but clear. It was the first direct proof of their collaboration. But when I got home, a new fear struck me. Dr. Rosenthal's report would be crucial, and I had no control over it. I called David, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. David's continuous absence worried me. I called his workplace. They said he hadn't come in. I drove to his apartment, but it was dark and locked. A neighbor saw me and said, "He left in a hurry with a woman and a little boy last night. Looked stressed." My heart sank. The threat to his custody must have forced him to flee with his son. I was on my own now. The isolation was terrifying. I had the video, the diary, the receipts, but without David's support, it felt fragile. I needed to get the evidence to Detective Miller immediately, before something happened to me. I went to the police station, but Detective Miller was out on a case. The officer at the desk took my name and said he'd have him call me. I didn't trust it. I left, feeling defeated. Now, I had to survive until the next court hearing and present everything myself. It was draining my mental and physical health. I wasn't sleeping, and the stress was a constant weight on my chest. The pressure intensified when I returned home to find a notice taped to my door from the Homeowners Association, citing complaints about neglect and clutter on my property. It was petty, but it was another tool to paint me as incapable. Sarah was using every avenue. I went inside and gathered all the evidence into one folder. The video, the diary copies, the medical records, the receipt, everything. I made 2 copies on a thumb drive at the library. I mailed one to myself at a P.O. box I rented under my maiden name, and I hid the other in a sealed envelope behind a loose brick in my fireplace. The originals I kept in my purse. I was not going to be caught unprepared. That evening, I tried to rest, but my mind raced. I thought about Lily, her laughter, her dreams. The injustice of it all fueled my resolve. The next morning, Dr. Rosenthal called. Eleanor, my report is finished. I've found you to be fully competent and capable of managing your own affairs. I nearly wept with relief. She went on, however, I've noted the significant stress you're under due to family conflict. I recommend family counselling. I thanked her, knowing Sarah would never agree. This report was my shield for the hearing. But just as I hung up, my doorbell rang. It was a process server. He handed me a new legal document. Sarah was suing me for defamation, claiming my accusations to the judge had damaged her reputation. The lawsuit demanded a public retraction and a significant monetary settlement. It was a brutal, calculated move to drain my resources and silence me. I closed the door, the papers shaking in my hand. She wasn't just trying to put me away. She was trying to bankrupt me and destroy what was left of my name. The defamation lawsuit was a masterstroke. I had limited savings, and legal fees would consume them quickly. I couldn't afford a prolonged battle. I needed to end this now. I decided to go to the media. It was a risky move, but if I could get a reporter interested, the public pressure might force an official investigation. I contacted a local news reporter who had written about elder fraud before, a woman named Chloe. I met her at a quiet cafe, away from my house. I showed her the video of Sarah and Dr. Evans and copies of Lily's diary entries. She was intrigued and horrified. "This is a big story," she said, "but I need to verify everything before we run it." I agreed, knowing it would take time I might not have. Going public would mean the final, irreversible break with my daughter and the scrutiny it would bring. But Lily deserved justice. As I left the cafe, I saw the dark sedan again. They were still watching. I drove to the P.O. box to check the mail and found an envelope from David. It was postmarked from a town 2 hours away. Inside was a brief note. "Eleanor, had to leave for my son's safety. I've left copies of everything with my lawyer, Alan Gross. His number is below. Trust him. Be careful." He had escaped, but he was still helping me. I felt a surge of gratitude. I called Alan Gross immediately. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man. He agreed to represent me in both the guardianship hearing and the defamation case. He also said he would reach out to Detective Miller again with David's evidence. For the first time, I had a professional on my side. The pressure eased slightly, but Sarah wasn't finished. That night, I received a voicemail from the Senior Care Placement Service again, this time confirming a tour of a facility for tomorrow. I hadn't scheduled anything. I called them back, furious, and discovered the request had come from someone using my email again. I had changed the password, but they must have had a backdoor or keylogger on my computer. I unplugged it entirely. The invasion was pervasive. The next day, I met with Alan Gross at his office. We went over the strategy for the hearing. He was confident we could get the guardianship petition dismissed with Dr. Rosenthal's report. The defamation case was trickier, but he thought we could turn it around on Sarah. As we talked, his assistant buzzed in. "There's a Chloe here from the news? She says it's urgent." Chloe came in, her face serious. "I did some digging on Dr. Evans," she said. "He's not just at the wellness center. He's a part owner of that chemical supply company. And I found something else. He's been disciplined before for prescribing unapproved substances. But here's the thing. The complaint was withdrawn by the patient's family. The family name was redacted, but the date was 6 months before Lily died." I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the family was ours. Sarah had covered for him before, for what they were doing to Lily. The scope of their deception was even wider than I thought. Alan looked at me. "This changes everything. We need to get this to the DA, now." But as Chloe left, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Sarah. I know you talked to a reporter. Call her off, or I'll release the photos. What photos? My mind raced, fearing the worst. Sarah's text about photos sent a chill through me. What photos could she possibly have? I immediately called Alan Gross, my hands shaking so badly I misdialed twice. When I got through, I read him the text. "She's bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We need to stay focused on the hearing. Don't engage with her." But I couldn't ignore it. My mind raced through old family albums, anything she could use to discredit me. I had to find out what she meant before she could use it against me publicly. The defamation lawsuit was bad enough. Fabricated evidence could destroy me. I decided to call Chloe, the reporter, and warn her. She answered on the first ring. "I just got a threat from Sarah," I said. "She mentioned photos if we don't back off." Chloe was quiet for a moment. "I'll hold the story for now, but I can't wait forever. My editor is pushing for it." I thanked her and hung up. The pressure was immense. I was balancing legal battles, media attention, and my own grief. I felt my age in every ache, every moment of fatigue. I needed to secure my home, my reputation, and my sanity. That afternoon, I checked my P.O. box. Among the bills was a plain envelope with no return address. Inside were printed photographs. They showed me entering the chemical supply warehouse and talking to the clerk. The angles were suspicious, making it look like I was there for some illicit purpose. There was also a photo of me meeting Chloe at the cafe, cropped to seem clandestine. Sarah was framing me as some kind of erratic conspirator, but the most damaging one was a screenshot of an email, forged, I was sure, where I seemed to be ordering the same substances found in Lily's bottle. It was a complete fabrication, but it looked convincing. I drove straight to Alan's office, the photos burning a hole in my purse. He examined them carefully. "This is serious," he admitted. "We need to get a digital forensics expert to prove these are doctored, but it will cost money and time." It wasn't just about money. It felt like another deep betrayal from my own daughter. As we spoke, Alan's assistant interrupted. "There's a delivery for you, Mrs. Gable." It was a formal notice from the court. Sarah had filed an emergency motion to have me placed in temporary guardianship based on these new evidences of my unstable behavior. The hearing was moved up to tomorrow morning. I left Alan's office feeling defeated, but on the drive home, I realized something. In one of the photos, I could see a reflection in a window, a person holding the camera. It was too blurry to make out, but it gave me an idea. I had security cameras installed at my house after the break-in, but I never checked the footage from that day. When I got home, I pulled up the recordings from the day the photos were taken. I fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. Then I saw it. A car pulling up across the street, and someone with a long lens camera aiming at my house. It was Dr. Evans. He wasn't just the accomplice. He was the one gathering evidence against me. I saved the footage, knowing I had to get it to Alan first thing in the morning. But as I was backing it up, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a business suit holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Gable? I'm from Adult Protective Services. I need to speak with you about an urgent matter." The woman at my door flashed a badge that looked official, but after Martha's warning, I was skeptical. "I need to verify your identity," I said through the closed door. She sighed impatiently. "Mrs. Gable, this is regarding your daughter's petition. I have a court order to conduct a home assessment immediately." My heart sank. Sarah was using the system to force her way in. I called Alan on my cell while keeping her waiting. He advised me to let her in, but to record everything. I turned on my phone's voice recorder and opened the door. The woman, who introduced herself as Ms. Gable, no relation, stepped inside and began taking notes, her eyes critically scanning every corner. I had to get through this assessment without giving her any reason to recommend guardianship. It meant hiding my investigation and acting perfectly normal, which felt like a betrayal of my own quest for justice. The emotional toll was heavy. I was playing a part in my own home. Ms. Gable asked pointed questions about my daily routine, my finances, my health. I answered truthfully but vaguely, emphasizing my independence. She then brought up the photos. "I've seen evidence that you've been visiting unsafe locations and associating with questionable individuals," she said, referring to the supply warehouse and Chloe. I explained it was part of looking into my granddaughter's death, but she made a note anyway. The pressure intensified when my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "I hope you're cooperating, Mom." She was monitoring this somehow. Ms. Gable asked to see my medication. I showed her my organized pill box, but she insisted on checking the bottles. As I pulled them from the cabinet, I noticed one was missing, my blood pressure medication. I always kept it there. Had someone been in my house again? I struggled to stay calm, telling her I must have misplaced it. She raised an eyebrow and wrote something down. This small thing could be twisted against me. Just as she was finishing, my landline rang. It was Detective Miller. "Mrs. Gable, we've reviewed the evidence from David and the video you provided. We're opening a formal investigation into Dr. Evans and your daughter for possible fraud and endangerment." Relief washed over me, but I couldn't show it. I thanked him and hung up. Ms. Gable had heard enough. "You're involved with the police?" she asked, her tone accusing. I simply said it was about a family matter. She left shortly after, her expression unreadable. I knew her report could sway the judge. After she was gone, I searched for my missing medication. I found it under the sink, behind some cleaning supplies. It had been moved. Someone had been in my house recently, planting doubts about my competence. I checked my security camera footage from last night. At 2 a.m., the motion sensor caught a figure using a key to enter my back door. It was too dark to see clearly, but the shape was familiar. Sarah. She had a key, and she was sabotaging me from within. I changed the locks immediately, but the violation cut deep. As I was finishing, Alan called. "The court moved the hearing to today at 4 p.m. due to the urgency." Sarah's lawyer submitted the photos and the APS report. "We need to be there in an hour." I looked at the clock. It was 2:30. I had to gather my evidence and face them. But when I went to get the thumb drive from behind the brick, it was gone. The missing thumb drive felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah must have taken it during her late-night visit. All that evidence, gone. I had the copies at the P.O. box and with Alan, but the originals were crucial. I rushed to the P.O. box and retrieved the envelope, my hands trembling. Then I drove to Alan's office, where we compiled everything we had left. The diary copies, the receipt, the security footage of Dr. Evans, and now the footage of Sarah entering my house. Alan was confident. "This shows her tampering with your home, which undermines her claims about your instability." But the price was steep. I was exposing my daughter's crimes in open court, forever severing our bond. We arrived at the courthouse with minutes to spare. Sarah was there with her lawyer, looking smug. She didn't know about the new footage. The judge, the same weary woman from before, called the session to order. Sarah's lawyer presented the photos and the APS report, painting me as a danger to myself. Then Alan played the security footage. The room fell silent as Sarah was seen sneaking into my house, moving my medication, and later, Dr. Evans was shown photographing me. The judge's expression hardened. What is the meaning of this, Miss Gable? She asked Sarah. Sarah stammered, That's not me. It's fabricated. But the footage was clear. Alan then presented Dr. Rosenthal's report confirming my competence. The judge dismissed the guardianship petition on the spot, citing egregious misconduct by Sarah. I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. As we left the courtroom, Sarah glared at me with pure hatred. You've ruined everything, she hissed. I didn't respond. The pressure was off for now, but the war wasn't over. Outside, Detective Miller was waiting. Mrs. Gable, we've issued warrants for Dr. Evans's records and want to question your daughter. Can you come to the station to give a formal statement? I agreed, but as I walked with him, I saw Sarah being approached by two officers. They started questioning her right there. Her face was pale, but she remained defiant. I got into Detective Miller's car, feeling a mix of victory and sorrow. At the station, I gave my statement, detailing everything from Lily's diary to the forged email. It took hours, and I was exhausted. When I finally returned home, it was dark. The house felt empty and lonely. I checked my messages. There was one from Chloe. The story is running tomorrow. I've verified everything with the police. It's going to be big. I thanked her and sat in the silence. Then my phone rang. It was Mark, my son. Mum, what's going on? Sarah just called me saying you've had her arrested. Is this true? His voice was angry and confused. I had to explain, but how could I make him understand? I took a deep breath. Mark, we need to talk. Can you come over? He agreed, but I knew it would be painful. As I waited, I realized that while I had won a battle, I might have lost my son too. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Mark standing there, his face a mask of betrayal and hurt. Start talking, Mum, he said, his voice cold. But behind him, I saw a car slow down, the dark sedan again. They were still watching. Mark stepped inside, his anger filling the room. Sarah said you're making up lies about her killing Lily. How could you, Mum? I led him to the couch and showed him Lily's diary, the entries about the vitamin drinks. I played the security footage of Sarah in my house. His expression shifted from anger to confusion to horror. I didn't know, he whispered, his voice breaking. She told me you were losing it. This truth cost him his relationship with his sister, and the family was now irrevocably broken. But he deserved to know. I explained everything, from the beginning. He listened, tears in his eyes. I'll support you, Mum, he said finally. But this is going to tear the family apart. I knew that, but Lily's memory demanded it. After he left, I felt a little less alone. The next morning, Chloe's story broke online. It detailed the scheme between Sarah and Dr. Evans, the forged evidence, and Lily's death. My phone started ringing off the hook with calls from other news outlets, but I ignored them. Detective Miller called to say they had brought Sarah in for formal questioning and raided Dr. Evans's office. The pressure was now on them. I went about my day, trying to find normalcy. I watered my plants, did some laundry, but the silence was deafening. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. It was a woman from the Homeowners Association, apologizing for the earlier notice. It seems there was a misunderstanding, she said. The negative attention from the news had forced them to back off. Small victory, but it mattered. I thanked her and closed the door, feeling a slight sense of justice. Later, Alan called. The defamation lawsuit has been dropped. Sarah's lawyer withdrew it, given the new developments. Another weight lifted, but he added, The DA is considering charges against Sarah and Dr. Evans, But it will take time, and there's something else. The chemical supply company is under investigation for selling unregulated substances. It turns out they've been supplying several wellness centers. The scope was wider than I thought, but it was no longer just my burden. That evening, I sat with Lily's photo, talking to her as I often did. "We're getting there, sweetheart," I whispered. The doorbell rang again. It was a delivery man with a package. Inside was a small box from David. It contained a heartfelt letter and a key. "This is for a storage unit where I kept copies of everything, just in case," he wrote. "I'm safe, and my son is safe. Thank you for fighting for Lily." I held the key tightly, grateful for his support. But as I read his letter, my eye caught a headline on the TV news. "Local doctor and mother allegedly involved in fatal scheme." The story was gaining traction. Then my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a distorted voice said, "You should have stopped when you had the chance." The line went dead. They were still out there, and now they were threatening me directly. I checked my security cameras and saw a figure standing at the end of my street, watching the house. It was Dr. Evans, and he wasn't alone. Dr. Evans and another man I didn't recognize were lurking near my house. I called Detective Miller immediately. "They're here, outside my home," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. He told me to stay inside and that he was sending a patrol car. I watched from the window as the two men talked, then got into a car and drove away just before the police arrived. The officer took my statement and increased patrols in the area, but the intimidation was clear. I had to make sure they faced justice, no matter what it cost me personally. The emotional strain was immense, but I had come too far to back down now. The next day, I met with Alan and Detective Miller at the police station. They had gathered enough evidence from the raids to press charges against Sarah and Dr. Evans for fraud, endangerment, and forgery. The DA was moving forward. Detective Miller explained that Sarah had confessed to some of it under pressure, admitting she envied Lily's youth and wanted her out of the way, but she claimed Dr. Evans manipulated her into the scheme. It was a partial victory, but it didn't bring Lily back. It cost me my daughter's freedom and any hope of reconciliation. I returned home, feeling hollow. The house was too quiet. I decided to sort through Lily's things properly, something I had been avoiding. In her closet, I found a box of her old school projects. Among them was a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter from Lily, written just a week before she died. "Dear Grandma, I think Mum is making me sick. I'm scared. I don't know who to trust. I wish I could live with you. I love you." I broke down, sobbing, holding the letter to my chest. She had reached out to me, and I hadn't known. That letter fueled my resolve. I made copies and gave one to Detective Miller. It was another piece of evidence, but more than that, it was a message from Lily. I framed the original and put it on my mantelpiece. A few days later, the news reported that Dr. Evans had been arrested at the airport, trying to flee the country. Sarah was released on bail, but faced strict conditions, including no contact with me. The family was fragmented. Mark was struggling, but he checked on me regularly. David called from his new location. He and his son were doing well. I focused on rebuilding my life. I started volunteering at a local community centre, helping other seniors with legal paperwork. It gave me a purpose. One afternoon, I came home to find a bouquet of flowers on my porch with a note from Mark. "I'm here for you, Mum." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. As I arranged the flowers, I realized that while I had lost a daughter, I had reclaimed my life and honored Lily's memory. The fight was almost over, but the peace was beginning. Then my phone rang. It was Alan. "The trial date is set. It's going to be hard, but we're ready." I took a deep breath. "I'm ready too," I said. But as I hung up, I noticed a familiar car driving slowly past my house. Sarah was out on bail, and she was watching. Sarah's car idled at the end of my street for the third day in a row. A dark reminder that bail didn't mean defeat in her mind. I had to document this violation and call my lawyer before she escalated. Today, I needed to meet with the prosecutor to review my testimony for the trial, but Sarah's presence made leaving the house feel like a risk. I grabbed my phone and took a video of her car, the license plate clear, then sent it to Alan and Detective Miller. The response was immediate. Alan said he'd file a motion to revoke her bail, but it would take time. I couldn't let her intimidate me out of doing what was right for Lily. I needed to get through this meeting and strengthen the case against Sarah. Every time I saw her, it felt like a fresh wound, a betrayal that went deeper than I could express. I lost my peace. I jumped at every sound, and my sleep was filled with nightmares of Lily's face. The pressure mounted when I noticed a second car now, a sedan I didn't recognize, parked near Sarah's. Were they working together? I called Mark and asked him to come over, hoping his presence might deter her. He agreed, but I heard the reluctance in his voice. This was tearing him apart, too. As I waited for Mark, I sorted through some old papers, trying to distract myself. In a pile of mail, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a medical form, Lily's life insurance policy, with Sarah as the sole beneficiary, taken out just months before her death. The amount was substantial. This was new evidence. Sarah had a financial motive. I called Alan immediately, and he told me to bring it to the meeting. This changed things. It wasn't just envy. It was greed. Mark arrived, and I showed him the form. His face paled. "I didn't know about this," he said, his voice shaky. How could she? We talked for a bit, and he promised to support me through the trial. But as he was leaving, he hesitated. "Mum, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be messy." I looked him in the eye. "For Lily, I have to." He nodded and left. I gathered my things to head to the prosecutor's office, but as I stepped outside, I saw Sarah get out of her car and start walking toward me. She stopped at the edge of my property, just staring. I stood my ground, phone in hand, ready to call the police. But then she smiled, a cold, empty smile, and threw a small item onto my lawn before driving away. It was a locket I'd given Lily for her 16th birthday. Inside was a recent photo of Sarah and Lily, both smiling, as if nothing was wrong. It was a twisted message, and it shook me to my core. I picked up the locket, my hands trembling. Sarah was playing psychological games, trying to unnerve me before the trial. I had to stay strong and not let her get under my skin. Today, I was scheduled to give a deposition at the prosecutor's office, and I couldn't afford to be emotional. I placed the locket in an evidence bag and called Detective Miller to report the incident. He said he'd add it to the file, but with the trial so close, there wasn't much else they could do. I needed to focus on delivering a clear, factual account of what I knew. I needed to give a strong deposition that would help secure a conviction. Reliving Lily's death and Sarah's betrayal in detail was emotionally draining. I felt older and wearier with each passing day. The pressure intensified when I arrived at the prosecutor's office and saw Dr. Evans's lawyer in the hallway. He gave me a cold stare, and I knew they were fighting hard to discredit me. The prosecutor, a young woman named Ms. Carter, reassured me and began the questioning. I stuck to the facts, referring to the diary, the medical records, and the new insurance form. About halfway through, Ms. Carter received a text. She paused, then said, We have a problem. Sarah's lawyer is claiming you have a history of mental illness and is presenting documents from your past. I was stunned. I had no such history. She showed me the papers, forged medical records from years ago, suggesting I'd been treated for paranoia. It was another fabrication, but it could sway a jury. We had to disprove this quickly. Ms. Carter called in a digital forensics expert to examine the documents. After the deposition, I felt defeated. How far would Sarah go? On the drive home, I decided to stop by the community centre where I volunteered. Being around others helped calm me. There, I ran into Martha, who had been avoiding me since the threats. She looked nervous, but pulled me aside. "I heard about the forged records," she whispered. "I think I know who helped her. There's a nurse at my old clinic who was fired for selling patient information. Her name is Brenda, and she's friends with Dr. Evans." This was a break. We could trace the forgeries back to them. I thanked Martha and called Alan with the information. He said he'd look into it immediately. When I got home, I checked my security cameras. Everything seemed normal. But then I noticed a small package on my porch. It wasn't there when I left. I approached cautiously and saw it was addressed to me, with no return address. I didn't open it. I called the police. When they arrived and inspected it, they found it was empty except for a single dead flower. Another intimidation tactic. But as the officer left, my phone rang. It was Alan, his voice urgent. "We found Brenda, and she's willing to talk. But she says there's more. Sarah was planning something else for the trial." I asked what, but he didn't know yet. The call dropped, and my phone screen went black. When it rebooted, a message flashed. "Stop now." They had hacked my phone again. My phone was compromised, so I used my landline to call Alan back. He confirmed that Brenda had given a statement implicating Sarah and Dr. Evans in the forged records, and she mentioned something about witness tampering for the trial. I needed to secure my communications and protect any potential witnesses, including myself. I drove to a store and bought a cheap prepaid phone, then contacted only Alan and Detective Miller from it. The invasion of privacy was frightening. I felt like I had no safe space left. I now needed to make sure no one else was manipulated or threatened before the trial. I lost my sense of security. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, and even my home didn't feel safe. The pressure came from multiple directions. Sarah's legal team, the hacked phone, and now this new threat of witness tampering. I decided to stay with Mark for a few days, but he lived in an apartment, and I worried about bringing trouble to his door. He agreed, though, and helped me set up the new phone. While at Mark's, I reviewed the trial documents again. I noticed a discrepancy in the timeline of Lily's medical visits. According to the records, Sarah took Lily to Dr. Evans more frequently in the months before her death, but the clinic's logs showed fewer visits. I pointed this out to Alan, and he said they'd subpoenaed the clinic's full records. The next day, he called with news. The clinic had 2 sets of books, one for insurance billing and one for actual visits. Sarah and Dr. Evans were overbilling and using the extra money to fund their scheme. This was another layer of fraud. I felt a surge of anger, but also determination. Lily was caught in their greed. That evening, Mark and I were watching the news when a report came on about Dr. Evans. He had made a deal with the prosecution, agreeing to testify against Sarah in exchange for a reduced sentence. The report said he claimed Sarah was the mastermind, that she pressured him into it. I didn't know if I believed him, but it meant Sarah might face stronger charges. Mark looked at me, his expression grim. "This is really happening, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling numb. The following morning, I received a call from Ms. Carter. Dr. Evans's testimony is a game changer, she said. But Sarah knows, and she's desperate. We have reason to believe she might try to flee. The judge issued a warrant to have her ankle monitor checked, but she's not at home. My heart raced. Where was she? Then I remembered the locket and the dead flower. Was she coming for me? I checked my security app on the new phone and saw motion at my house. Someone was there. I called Detective Miller, but as I did, I got a text from an unknown number on the prepaid phone. I know where you are? How did they find me at Mark's? I looked out the window and saw Sarah's car pulling into the parking lot. Sarah was here, at Mark's apartment. I told Mark, and he immediately called the police. We watched from the window as she sat in her car, not getting out. She was just waiting, watching. The police arrived quickly and spoke to her. Since she violated the no-contact order by coming here, they took her into custody. As they led her away, she shouted at me, "You'll never prove it. She was mine to do with as I pleased." Her words chilled me. She saw Lily as property, not a person. This incident would likely revoke her bail, but the hatred in her eyes was terrifying. I needed to get through the trial without any more incidents. It meant the complete end of my relationship with Sarah. There was no going back after this. The pressure eased slightly with her back in jail, but I knew her lawyers would fight harder. I returned home the next day, with Mark insisting on staying with me for a while. We upgraded my security system and changed all the locks again. I focused on preparing for the trial, going over my testimony with Ms. Carter. She warned me that Sarah's defense would attack my credibility, bringing up the forged mental health records and my obsession with the case. A week before the trial, Alan called with unexpected news. "We found emails between Sarah and Dr. Evans on a hidden server," he said. "They discuss removing Lily to access the insurance money and then targeting your assets next. It's all there, in their own words." This was the smoking gun we needed. I felt a mix of relief and horror. It was proof of premeditation. Ms. Carter said this would likely lead to murder charges, not just fraud. The weight of it was overwhelming. My daughter had planned to kill her own child for money. I spent the day in a daze, thinking about Lily and how she must have felt. That evening, I visited her grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought flowers and sat there, talking to her. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I whispered. "I wish I had known." As I was leaving, I saw a figure standing near the cemetery entrance. It was David, Lily's father. He had driven back to town for the trial. We hugged, and he said, "I'm here for you, Eleanor. We'll get justice for Lily." Having him there was a comfort. We were in this together. The day before the trial, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah, sent from jail. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a rambling, angry letter, accusing me of ruining her life and claiming Lily was better off dead because she was weak. There was no remorse, only blame. I showed it to Alan, and he said it could be used as evidence of her state of mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. The trial started tomorrow, and I was the first witness. As I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my security system, a motion alert in the backyard. I checked the camera and saw a shadowy figure moving near the house. Before I could call anyone, the power went out. The power outage plunged the house into darkness. I grabbed my prepaid phone and called 911, then woke Mark. We stayed in my room, listening. The security system had a battery backup, but the cameras were offline. I heard footsteps outside my window. Mark shouted, "Who's there?" The footsteps retreated, and then we heard a car speed away. The police arrived quickly and restored power. They found evidence of someone trying to tamper with the electrical box. It was another attempt to intimidate me, likely by someone working with Sarah or Dr. Evans. I couldn't let this shake me. The trial started in a few hours. I needed to testify clearly and truthfully, no matter what. I had to endure the public scrutiny and the pain of facing Sarah in court. The pressure was immense, but I had to be strong for Lily. Mark and I drove to the courthouse together. The place was crowded with media. Chloe's story had drawn attention. Inside, I saw Sarah at the defense table, looking pale and angry. She didn't look at me. Dr. Evans was there too, in custody, ready to testify against her. The judge called the court to order, and I was called to the stand. Ms. Carter led me through my testimony. I spoke about finding Lily's diary, the medical records, the insurance policy, and the events that followed. I kept my voice steady, focusing on the facts. When it was time for cross-examination, Sarah's lawyer attacked my mental state, bringing up the forged records. But we were prepared. Alan presented the evidence from Brenda and the digital forensics, showing the records were fake. The lawyer then tried to paint me as a vengeful grandmother, but I stayed calm, reiterating that I was seeking justice for Lily. During a break, I saw Mark talking to David in the hallway. They both looked supportive, but I felt the strain on them too. Back in court, Dr. Evans took the stand. He testified that Sarah had approached him with the idea, promising him money and a share of the insurance. He said she was jealous of Lily's youth and wanted her out of the way to inherit my assets sooner. It was hard to listen to, but it confirmed everything. Sarah's lawyer tried to discredit him, but the emails we found supported his story. The trial stretched over several days. On the final day, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. Sarah was found guilty on all counts: fraud, endangerment, forgery, and now murder in the second degree. As the judge read the verdict, Sarah stared at me with pure hatred, but I felt no satisfaction, only sorrow. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Dr. Evans received a lighter sentence due to his cooperation, but he would still spend years behind bars. Afterward, I stood outside the courthouse with Mark and David. We were quiet, lost in our thoughts. The media swarmed, but I didn't speak to them. I just wanted to go home. That evening, I sat alone in my living room, looking at Lily's photo on the mantel. It was over, but the emptiness remained. I had justice, but I had lost a daughter. A few days later, I received a package from David. It was a quilt made from Lily's old clothes. I wrapped myself in it, and finally allowed myself to cry. The fight was done, and now I had to find a way to live with the peace I had fought so hard to win. But as I looked out the window, I saw a familiar figure walking by, an old neighbor who had always been kind. She smiled and waved, and I waved back. Life would go on, and I would honor Lily by living it fully. The first frost coated the grass around Lily's headstone, crunching under my boots. I came here every week, telling her about my days, hoping she could hear me. Today, I felt a prickling on the back of my neck, the kind that says you're not alone. I turned slowly and saw a woman standing by a tree about 50 yards away, just watching. She was too far to recognize, but her posture was stiff, unfamiliar. I had to find out who she was and why she was here. My peace felt fragile, like glass about to crack. I placed the fresh flowers I'd brought and walked back to my car, keeping an eye on her. She didn't move, just stood there, a silent sentinel. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this someone from Sarah's past? A supporter? The trial was over, but the shadows it cast were long. I drove home, checking my mirror every few seconds. No one followed, but the unease stayed. At home, I called Detective Miller. He said Sarah had no known associates who would bother me, but he'd look into it. I needed to feel safe again, to reclaim the quiet life I'd fought for. I lived with constant vigilance, this fear that justice hadn't truly brought peace. Later that afternoon, Mark came over with my grandson, Jake. We baked cookies, and for a while the kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of chocolate chips. But when Mark left, the silence felt heavier. I double-checked all the locks and set the alarm. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph of Lily as a toddler, playing in a park. On the back, written in neat block letters, "She was always so happy before you interfered." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a random watcher. This was personal, aimed directly at my guilt. The weight of it returned, subtle but insidious. I called Alan, my lawyer. He advised me to keep the photo as evidence and report it. But who was doing this? Sarah was in prison, Dr. Evans too. Who was left? I decided to visit Martha, my nurse friend. She might know if anyone from the clinic held a grudge. At her house, I showed her the photo. She studied it, then her eyes widened. "I remember this," she said. "Sarah used to bring Lily to that park all the time. There was another mother she was friendly with, a woman named Carol. They had a falling out before Lily died. Carol blamed Sarah for something, but I never knew what. This was a new thread. Carol? I didn't recall Sarah mentioning her. Martha didn't have a last name, but she thought Carol lived in the old neighborhood. Driving home, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Maybe Carol was the watcher, angry about the trial. But why now? As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You don't want to know what else I have." I froze, my hand on the car door. They were monitoring me, knowing I'd spoken to Martha. I hurried inside, my mind racing. Who was Carol, and what did she have to do with this? Then I remembered something Sarah said during the trial, something about a friend who understood. I'd thought it was meaningless, but now it felt significant. I went to my desk and pulled out the trial transcripts. As I flipped through the pages, I found it. Sarah mentioned a C who helped her with arrangements early on. The prosecutor had dismissed it as irrelevant. But now, with Carol in the picture, it might be everything. My eyes landed on a footnote. C referred to a Carol Wiseman. I had a full name. But as I reached for the phone to call Detective Miller, I heard a faint click from the back door. The alarm hadn't gone off. Someone was inside the house. I stood frozen in my study, the transcript pages rustling in my trembling hands. The click from the back door was unmistakable. Someone had bypassed the alarm. I had to get out or hide, immediately. I needed to survive this intrusion and call for help. The fear was a physical weight, crushing my chest. I thought of Lily, of how she must have felt in her last moments, and a surge of anger pushed back the terror. I grabbed the heavy bookend from my desk, a solid brass owl my husband had loved, and crept toward the hallway. The house was silent, too silent. I peered around the corner. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, but no one was in sight. I needed to reach the landline in the living room. My cell was on the kitchen counter. I moved slowly, my knees protesting every step. Then I heard a soft footfall from the bedroom hallway. They were between me and the front door. I ducked into the small bathroom under the stairs, pulling the door almost shut. This fight cost me my sense of safety, shattered once again. I'd worked so hard to feel secure here. Now I was a prisoner in my own home. I listened, hearing drawers opening and closing in my bedroom. They were searching for something. What? The evidence was all with the police or in safe deposit boxes. The tension built as the footsteps moved closer. I held the bookend tight, ready to swing. Then, my phone on the counter rang, loud in the stillness. The footsteps halted, then hurried toward the kitchen. I heard a muttered curse, then the back door opened and slammed shut. I waited, heart pounding, until I heard a car engine start and speed away. I rushed to the kitchen, locking the door first, then grabbing my phone. It was Mark, calling to check on me. I told him what happened, my voice shaking. He said he was coming over right away. When Mark arrived, we called the police. They found no forced entry, but the alarm system had been disabled from the outside. A professional job. Detective Miller came by and took my statement. I told him about Carol Wiseman. He ran the name and found she had a record for petty theft and harassment. She was Sarah's former friend, and she'd been in contact with Sarah during the trial, visiting her in jail. Carol believed Sarah was innocent and thought I had framed her. This was her way of seeking revenge. What changed was that Carol wasn't a mastermind. She was a misguided ally, but dangerous in her obsession. Mark insisted I stay with him for a few days. I packed a bag, feeling defeated. As we left, I noticed something on the porch, a small folded piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a child's drawing, crude but recognizable. A house with smoke coming out the windows and a stick figure lying down. Underneath, it said Lily in wobbly letters. My breath caught. Where did Carol get this? Did Lily draw it? I showed it to Detective Miller. He said he'd add it to the file and put out a bolo for Carol. But as we drove to Mark's, I couldn't shake the image. That drawing felt like a message from beyond, a clue I was missing. When we arrived, Mark's son Jake ran to greet me. He hugged me tight, and I held him close, feeling the weight of protecting what family I had left. But later, as I tried to sleep in Mark's guest room, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from an anonymous account, with a scanned image of an old prescription bottle. Lily's, with Dr. Evans's name, but the date was after his license was suspended. How did Carol have this? And why send it now? The email subject line read, "You missed one." The email with the prescription image kept me awake all night. I had to find out what Carol knew and stop her before she escalated. First thing in the morning, I called Detective Miller and forwarded the email. He said they were tracking Carol's last known address, but she seemed to have gone off-grid. I needed to take action myself. Waiting felt like inviting more trouble. Mark helped me review all the old documents from the case, looking for any mention of Carol or this prescription. It was emotionally draining. Each document brought back the pain of Lily's loss, and now I was reliving it with this new threat. We spent hours going through boxes. I found a stack of Lily's school papers I'd kept. Among them was a friendship bracelet and a note that said, "To Lily, from Carol's daughter, Emma." I'd forgotten that Carol had a daughter around Lily's age. They used to play together. This connected Carol more personally. Maybe her grudge was about her daughter too. I called Martha again, and she remembered that Carol's daughter, Emma, had been in the same class as Lily, and that they had a falling out after Lily started getting sick. Carol might have believed Sarah's lies that I was involved. Things got worse when I got a call from Jake's school. Someone had called, claiming to be his grandmother, asking about his pickup schedule. The school secretary became suspicious and called Mark. It had to be Carol, probing for weaknesses. We tightened security at the school and warned them not to release any information. Mark was furious and scared. He wanted to confront Carol himself, but I persuaded him to let the police handle it. We couldn't risk Jake. That afternoon, Detective Miller called with an update. They'd found Carol's car abandoned near the old neighborhood, but no sign of her. He also said the prescription bottle in the email was a fake. The dates didn't match any records, so it was likely another intimidation tactic. But why? What was Carol trying to achieve? Then I remembered something from Sarah's jail letter. She'd scribbled, "C has the key," at the bottom, which I'd thought was metaphorical. But what if it was literal? A key to what? I went through Sarah's old things that I'd stored in the garage. In a box of her childhood memorabilia, I found a small key taped to the inside lid of a jewelry box. It looked like a safety deposit box key. I took the key to the bank I use. The manager confirmed it was for a box here, but it was under Sarah's name, and I needed legal access since she was incarcerated. Alan helped me get a court order quickly. When we opened the box, we found stacks of cash, some jewelry, and a sealed envelope addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter from Sarah, written before the trial. She admitted everything but claimed Carol had blackmailed her into it, threatening to harm Emma if Sarah didn't go through with the plan. According to Sarah, Carol was jealous because Lily was healthier and happier than Emma, who had chronic health issues. Sarah wrote that Carol provided the substances and forged the records, and she kept evidence against Carol as insurance. This changed everything. Carol wasn't just a supporter. She was a co-conspirator who had escaped notice. The letter ended with, "Mum, I'm sorry. Please protect Emma from her." I stood there, stunned. All this time, I thought Sarah was the sole villain. But Carol was pulling strings too. As we left the bank, Alan called Detective Miller with the new evidence. But when I got home, there was a voicemail from Martha. "Eleanor, I just saw Carol at the grocery store. She was asking about you and Jake. She looked desperate. Be careful." I played the message again, and in the background, I heard a child crying. It sounded like Emma. The voicemail from Martha sent a new wave of fear through me. Carol was involving children now, her own daughter Emma. I had to find Carol and Emma before something terrible happened. I aimed to use the new evidence from Sarah's letter to get Carol arrested and ensure Emma's safety. I realized that my family's tragedy had deeper roots, affecting another child. I felt a responsibility to help Emma, even if her mother was my tormentor. Detective Miller issued a warrant for Carol's arrest based on Sarah's letter, and they put out an alert for Emma as a missing juvenile. Mark and I stayed at his place, with police monitoring both our homes. I spent the day racking my brain for where Carol might be. She had no job, no recent address. I thought about the old park where Lily used to play, the one in the photo. It was a long shot, but I drove there with Mark. The park was empty, the swings creaking in the wind. But on a bench, I saw a woman sitting alone, hunched over. It was Carol. She looked up as we approached, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. "Stay back," she shouted. "I just want to talk," I said, keeping my distance. Mark called the police quietly. Carol laughed, a harsh sound. "Talk? About what? How you destroyed my life? Sarah promised we'd be rich, that we could help Emma. But you ruined it all." She admitted she'd been supplying Sarah with the substances, jealous that Lily was healthy while Emma suffered. She thought if Lily was gone, Sarah would share the insurance money to pay for Emma's treatments. But after Sarah was arrested, Carol had no money and no way to help Emma, who was getting sicker. She was driven by desperation. She had nothing left to lose. She blamed me for exposing them, not seeing her own role in it. Just then, a small voice came from a nearby bush. "Mommy?" Emma emerged, looking pale and thin. My heart broke for her. Carol hugged her tightly, sobbing. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. The police arrived then, and Detective Miller handled it gently. Carol was arrested without resistance, and Child Services took Emma for medical care. I promised to check on Emma to make sure she was okay. I hadn't expected this. Carol's motive was maternal, twisted by envy and despair, much like Sarah's. Back home, I felt drained, but lighter. The main threat was over. I visited Lily's grave again, telling her about Carol and Emma. "I hope you can forgive us all," I whispered. The next week, I started volunteering at the children's hospital, where Emma was being treated. I read to her sometimes, and she began to smile again. Mark and Jake joined me often, and we built a new routine. But one evening, as I was sorting through old photos, I found one of Lily and Emma together, arms around each other, grinning. They were innocent in all this. I framed it and put it next to Lily's on the mantel. Life was moving forward, but the memories stayed. Then, I received a letter from the prison. Sarah wanted to see me. I hadn't visited her since the trial. Part of me wanted to refuse, but another part wondered if there was more to say. I decided to go, not for closure, but for curiosity. As I drove to the prison, I thought about what I would say. But when I saw her through the glass, she looked older, defeated. She didn't speak at first, just stared. Then she said, "Mum, I need to tell you something about Dad." I froze. My husband had died years ago. What could she possibly say? Her words hung in the air, and I knew whatever came next would change everything I thought I knew. Sarah's mention of my late husband, Frank, sent a chill through me. He had been my rock, a kind man who died of a heart attack 5 years ago. What could she know about him? I had to hear her out, but I steeled myself for more lies. "What about your father?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Sarah looked down, then met my eyes. "He knew, Mom. He knew I was jealous of Lily and he warned me to stop. But he didn't know how far I'd go." She claimed that Frank had suspected her resentment and had set up a trust for Lily in his will, separate from the main estate, to protect her. But Sarah had found the documents and destroyed them after he died, so I never knew. She said this was why she accelerated her plan, to get the money before I might discover the trust. I sat there, stunned. Frank had tried to protect Lily, even from beyond the grave. Hearing this shook my fondest memories. Had Frank been keeping secrets too? But no, he was being a good grandfather. Sarah was twisting things again. I left the prison without saying goodbye. I needed to verify her story. I called Alan, and we dug into Frank's old files. After hours of searching, we found a reference to a separate trust in his lawyer's archives, but the documents were missing. The lawyer had retired, but his firm had backups. It took a week, but we recovered copies. Frank had indeed set up a small trust for Lily's education, with me as the trustee. Sarah had intercepted the mail and hidden it. The money was still there, untouched. I decided to use it to set up a scholarship in Lily's name at her old school. It felt right, a way to honor Frank's intention and Lily's memory. With that settled, I focused on the present. I spent more time with Mark and Jake, and I visited Emma regularly. She was responding well to treatment and had been placed with a foster family who cared for her deeply. I became a sort of grandmother figure to her, and we'd have picnics in the park where she and Lily once played. The pain didn't disappear, but it softened, becoming a part of me rather than a wound. I joined a grief support group and found comfort in sharing stories with others who understood. Months passed, and life found a new rhythm. I sold my old house and bought a smaller place near Mark, with a garden where I grew lilies. On the anniversary of Lily's death, Mark, Jake, David, and I gathered at her grave. We shared memories and laughed through tears. David brought Emma, and she placed a drawing she'd made next to the flowers. It showed two girls holding hands under a rainbow. "For Lily," she said. I hugged her tight. That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. The colours painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. I thought about Frank, Lily, Sarah, and all we'd been through. There was no grand forgiveness, no dramatic reconciliation, just quiet acceptance. The fight was over, and I had survived. I had lost a daughter, but I had gained a deeper appreciation for the family I had left. I picked up my knitting, a blanket for Emma, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past would always be with me, but now I could look forward to tomorrow. The breeze rustled the leaves, and I smiled, knowing Lily would have wanted this for me.